What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Danny and Bush coming at you with the players we can't stop drafting, our must-draft players at running back. You guys would have seen the quarterback top 10 yesterday. Today, we're going to be talking about our top 10 running backs that we can't stop drafting this year. Basically, if you guys missed yesterday's video, go check it out. But what we're doing is going over our most owned players in Underdog Fantasy from all the drafts that we've done throughout the duration of this summer, and basically talking about the guys that we're leaving our drafts with more often than not. We're going to talk about some guys in the early rounds at running back, and we're going to talk about some guys at the late rounds at running back. And one thing I want to preface before we get into this is we're not going to talk about Christian McCaffrey, obviously, because you need the first overall pick to get Christian McCaffrey. So the early first round guys, we're not really going to touch on. We're going to focus more on guys around that 1-2 turn area as the first kind of early round guys.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, we both believe that if you are able to hit on the running back position, if you get a league-winning upside type of running back, you're going to be able to hit. So we're going to talk about that kind of potential more so with the early round guys. But the late round guys, again, the reason why we avoid the RB dead zone, the reason why we wait and fill in our RB depth, is because guys later in your drafts can supplement that RB2, RB3 production and allow you to build out your wide receiver, your tight end, your quarterback core. So I'm excited. Again, running backs is such a fascinating topic to talk about, because if you talk to one person, they'll say, oh, you got to pound running back 3 of your first 5 picks. You talk to another person, say, oh, I'm not touching my first running back to RB or to round 7. And that's just kind of the dynamic and why we love fantasy football, because at the end of the day here, there's no set in stone strategy. It's about what value falls to you and how you can really structure your team from a roster construction standpoint. So I'm excited.
For sure. Let's hit the intro and then we'll get right into this.
So let's start off with the first name of the list. And this is going to be someone you would have heard on yesterday's video, but it's going to be DeAndre Swift, running back for the Detroit Lions, currently going off the board as the RB16, 34th overall player. And Bush could talk about it for days. Bush can keep talking about this guy multiple, but we wanted to spice it up, give you guys a different perspective since you would have heard that yesterday. But with DeAndre Swift, I'm sure, as Bush would have echoed, this is an elite player. I mean, the talent is absolutely there with this player. And when you're talking about exactly what you look for in your running back, you look for 3 down skill set. And DeAndre Swift showed that in abundance last year. I mean, this is an elite pass catcher, elite in all levels of the field. He really reminds me of a young Aaron Jones really stepping into his mold on that Detroit Lions offense. And when you're talking about the situation, I mentioned 3 down skill set. Well, that's going to be very important this year, because they actually just cut a guy that was slated to be one of their starting wide receivers all offseason. And this is a team that has vacated 300 targets from last year. We talked about, from a continuity standpoint, who exactly earns the targets when we were talking about do not make these mistakes video. Well, DeAndre Swift being on the team last year would be that guy in line to receive that boost in targets. And if that was able to happen, I mean, we've seen this coaching staff in the past with Dan Campbell coming in as head coach and with Anthony Lynn coming in from the Chargers. We have seen that 2 of the more efficiently used running backs in these past few years have been Alvin Kamara and Austin Eckler. And while it may be high praise to put DeAndre Swift in that area just yet, I do think from his capability standpoint, from his skill set, he can be able to thrive in that type of role. So I'm super excited. And the main question some people might have would be the injury. Well, we've actually talked to multiple doctors on the scene, including Dr. Jesse Morse, who has made a video on it. And he actually compared it to that David Montgomery injury from last year, which he's not concerned about going into the season.
Yeah, right. I'm not really going to add anything else on DeAndre Swift. Again, the point of this video is to give you guys some like 15, 20 minute, if you guys are scrambling for your draft, and I actually put out a playlist on our channel and I kind of organized it accordingly called Watch This If You're Panicking for Your Fantasy Draft. And this video will most certainly be in it, because we know that not everybody has time to watch a full 40-minute breakdown of me talking about DeAndre Swift for 10 minutes. So that's kind of the rundown on DeAndre Swift. Another guy that fits into the same mold that is a must draft player for me. DeAndre Swift, currently my second owned running back on Underdog Fantasy at 22.9%. He is tied with another second-year running back at 22.9% as well in Antonio Gibson. And Gibson, the RB12 off the board, 18th overall pick. He was RB4 before that turf toe injury last year. That's basically the main appeal to Antonio Gibson. Again, if you guys don't know who Antonio Gibson was coming out of college, he played wide receiver. So the fact that he was a RB4, a top 5 running back, in the first 13 games of his NFL career at a new position, a position that he didn't play in college, is extremely impressive. Of course, being a wide receiver, he's excellent in the passing game. He's really good when they designed him screenplays and stuff. Last year, he was a top 7 running back at commanding targets. Anytime he ran a route, he was getting targeted on about like 23% of his routes, as you guys will see on the screen. So that third down usage that we haven't quite seen from him in the preseason will come eventually. I think he just needs to get a little better in pass protection. And maybe they're even saving that look of him being on third down for the regular season and using JD McKissic as kind of like a disguise for teams so that they don't figure out the Washington offense. Anyway, that offense is vastly improved. Ryan Fitzpatrick is a guy that is a big-time quarterback upgrade. They were the number 32 offense in DVOA last year, and Gibson was still RB4 before his injury for a team that deployed him as a position that he didn't play in college. So this guy's really just scratching the surface. That's why he's such a big-time buy for me, is because I think the ceiling is absolutely phenomenal for him.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with it, Gibson. And if you guys want more information, fully in-depth breakdown on him, I'm actually going to be releasing my edition of the breakouts video later this week. But yeah, you guys have known our infatuation with Antonio Gibson all offseason, and I'm lucky I had the first pick in that video to be able to select Antonio Gibson. So very happy. The next person on the list we're going to mention, another guy you've been all in on all offseason, and that's going to be the new Pittsburgh Steelers running back. I'll let you take it away with Najee Harris.
Yeah, Najee Harris, RB11, 16th overall in ADP. This guy might never leave the field. That's why I like him so much. That's why I own him so much. I have him as my 20.8% drafted ownership in terms of Underdog Fantasy. He's my 5th highest owned running back currently on the app. This guy might never leave the field. 45 out of 51 snaps in the preseason with the first team. This is a 3-down workhorse. My comp for him coming out of school was David Johnson, so I know he has that bell cow usage in his arsenal. He's a 6'3", 230-pound running back that is excellent in the passing game. Really, only David Johnson kind of fits that prototype, along with a guy like Le'Veon Bell as well, of course. We know that the Steelers are well-versed to use a running back that way. And Mike Tomlin and the Steelers, they tagged Le'Veon Bell twice after his rookie contract. So just so that they could use the guy up before he hit free agency. So you can be rest assured that the second this guy gets in the NFL, they're not going to let him acclimate to the NFL. They know the running backs on their rookie contracts are the best advantage that they can have to have an elite running game. So they're going to use up Najee Harris while he's on that rookie contract and probably send him packing 5 years from now. So his ability plus that top 5 volume at the position that I expect will probably make it impossible for him not to be excellent, in my opinion.
Yeah, and quickly on Harris, I mean, it's funny because he's one of the few backs in the league that is both the best pass catcher and the best pure runner on his roster. That's the type of compliment you get when you're taking a Najee Harris. Pure bred workhorse running back. I mean, this is the absolute stable horse you look for when putting them on the race. I genuinely think that when you're getting Najee Harris in your drafts, you're getting locked into 320 touches. You're getting locked into 70, 80 targets. I genuinely believe that is in store for him in the 2021 season. And speaking of rookie running backs, I'm glad you talked about our consensus RB1. Well, I'm actually going to go into the next one, and rest in peace, Travis Etienne. Definitely would have been on this list, but unfortunately it had to suffer that Liz Frank injury that would have ended the season. But that's all good because we got another stud running back heading over in Denver. We got Javonte Williams, running back 26, 67th overall player off the board currently. And talk about workhorse with Najee Harris. I mean, this is the type of player that profiles as a workhorse running back in terms of his size, his speed, his agility. I've talked about his advanced metrics throughout the offseason, but he was one of the PFF's best charted running backs they've really ever scouted. I mean, he's super elusive. He's a tackle breaking machine. And we have seen this preseason. I get it that Melvin Gordon didn't play in the first couple, that he's been used as that workhorse back enough so that Vic Fangio actually went out and spoke on his decision to rest Javonte Williams versus the Rams and basically said that he wasn't really dealing with any injury. We wanted to feature Melvin Gordon early in that game and then give the other guys, the young guys, a chance. We felt good about what Javonte has done this first couple of weeks. What that tells me is they want to preserve this guy. They want him to be ready for the regular season to roll. And they wanted to really showcase Melvin Gordon for running back needy teams that maybe wanted to trade for him because they've liked what they've seen with Javonte Williams thus far. He has the burst. He has the 3-down skill set. He's been really efficient at actually putting the ball in the end zone thus far. So if he is able to get that workhorse role, we could be talking about a guy that ends up in that area of Najee Harris, RB12, RB14. And at his current price tag of RB25, that is an absolute steal.
Right. And we can't project the volume that he's going to get right away because I do expect Melvin Gordon to be involved, but I do think this is still going to be a back end RB2 that you can flex at the beginning of the season. And I imagine the beginning of the season is the lowest point in his role and the lowest confidence that you'll ever have starting the guy, because there's a multitude of different ways that this guy can take over the starting job. He can outright win it. Melvin Gordon could get injured because he's an older running back and he's had an injury history to begin with. Or like you said, he could get traded or cut because he's dealing with a legal situation, and yeah, he has a lot of dead money, but teams aren't afraid to cut players that are bad for their locker room just to show that they're kind of like setting the tone, so to speak, from a PR perspective. So I definitely could see Melvin Gordon not being on this team week 1. And if that happens and you drafted Javonte Williams like I did in my home league yesterday, then this is going to be a guy that returns huge, huge value for you. So the last guy in this early round range that we're going to talk about is David Montgomery, running back 15, 32nd overall. Another guy for me that is over 20% ownership for me. I have him tied with Najee Harris for 20.8%. To me, he's discount Joe Mixon. I've kind of talked about it before. This is a 3-down workhorse running back that has been backed up by this coaching staff. Every time that they talk about David Montgomery, they talk about wanting to get him the ball all the time. 20 carries a game, whatever the case is. We know Tariq Cohen is coming off of a torn ACL. Sounds like he's not 100% back yet. Pretty much every report we've heard about Tariq Cohen's ACL tear is that he's not going to be remotely close to the start of the season. And on top of that, we haven't really talked about the quarterback upgrade for David Montgomery, but it does really help him because by all accounts, Justin Fields is winning this quarterback competition. Whether they're going to start him week 1 or not, whenever Justin Fields gets on the field, pun intended, he's a mobile quarterback. He's going to help David Montgomery from an efficiency standpoint. And I also just think he's a better quarterback for the offense and scoring opportunities as well for David Montgomery. And Montgomery was a guy that was heavily involved in the red zone, of course, as the feature back for this team. So this is a guy that I always take in the 3rd round. Anytime he's there in the 3rd round, I'll take him. And usually, and the reason he's so highly owned for me on Underdog is because he's there in the 4th round most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're talking about the few dead zone running backs that we're comfortable with taking, you're talking about dead zone rounds 3 to 7 on occasion. David Montgomery and Javonte Williams are the two that I target most frequently because I view David Montgomery, again, as you mentioned, people want to say B-Tech Joe Mixon. I honestly think he might even be a better talent, pure talent, than what Joe Mixon represents. Again, when you want to talk about the offense as a whole, I understand you wanting to lean Joe Mixon, but that's the type of volume we should expect. And if Justin Fields is entering the fray, talk about the efficiency we could see with David Montgomery. We've seen the effect that rushing quarterbacks have on their running backs' efficiency numbers. I think David Montgomery could be in store for a huge year. So I fully agree with you. At current ADP, his is screaming value in our drafts.
Yeah, I definitely don't disagree. So from the early round guys, let's get to the late round guys. Some of the guys that we've been drafting late in Underdog drafts, late in our home league drafts. So I'll let you kick it off with a guy who's been pretty much a staple of late round running backs for a while.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that if you are an RB0 truther, he is not leaving your teams because it's James White, running back from the New England Patriots. And the common theme of these late round running backs is we see RB2, RB3 type of stability from these guys. And the theme about them is they all catch the ball for the most part, apart from one name that actually plays for your Tampa Bay Buccaneers we'll mention. James White, the epitome of pass catching running back. I mean, you guys should see the numbers on the screen, but his targets, I mean, it peaked at 123, 95 the year after. I think it could return to that type of area. Now, is he going to break his record for receiving targets in the year? I don't necessarily think he'll get there. But if he's hovering around that 75 to 95 range with Mac Jones potentially entering the fray as a starter, moving off of Cam Newton, that could only bode well for James White in terms of his reliability as that team's third down back. Look, as much as I love Damian Harris, I think he's a very talented runner of the football. I don't necessarily think he can really take on that full 3-down pass catching workhorse role. And that only benefits James White. So he's one of the better pass catching running backs in the league. Bill Belichick is not dumb. He is going to get him in his spaces to make plays with the ball in his hands. I think James White is almost a lock for 3.5 to 4 receptions per game. And if you're playing in any type of PPR format and getting that currently in like the 12th, 13th round, I mean, that's just absolute money. You build out your wide receiver core, you get this guy as your RB3 and you're laughing to the bank.
Right, exactly. And you guys have heard me hype up Damian Harris to no end. Not once have I ever said anything about his third down role. I always talk about Damian Harris as a 1 and 2 down player. And the reason is because James White occupies that role on this team. There's really no kind of ifs, ands, or buts about it. As much as we like James White, as much as people are going to like Ramondre Stevenson, this is his role on the team. And Mac Jones being the starter only helps that out. So Ronald Jones, another Jones that we're going to be talking about, is my highest owned running back on all of Underdog. Now, one thing I will preface this with is that it is kind of due to the nature of the format because I don't have to choose when to start Ronald Jones because it is best ball. But This is still a guy that's going off the board as RB33, 95th overall player. This is a guy that you can consistently get in the 8th, 9th, 10th round of your drafts. The reason I pick him of the Bucs running backs is because he's the best running back in the backfield. It's really that simple. He's the best runner of the football. I think he's a flex play in any kind of good matchups that you're going to see in redraft leagues. The problem is, when does he, get the volume that week? Does he get the touchdown? Does Fournette get the touchdown? Maybe Gio scores a touchdown. We haven't really seen how this running back core is going to shake out. I think it's going to be a headache from a redraft perspective, but he is still a guy that I'm willing to take the shot on because the running back position is very fragile, especially running backs like Leonard Fournette, who we've seen in the past deal with injuries. So I think if Ronald Jones were to lose Leonard Fournette or Gio Bernard for a number of games, this is a guy that you could legitimately expect top 15 running back production from, because that's what we saw from him last year.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. He's one of my higher owned running backs as well. And I fully agree from a pure rushing standpoint. What he represents is basically what all fragile running back truthers, zero RB truthers covet. And that's going to be a main, not workhorse, but main back role in a very good offense. And we both expect the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to yield a very good offense this year. I fully expect Ronald Jones to return on his value. I mean, RB33 for a guy who was a legitimate top 15 to 20 running back last year because of a Fugazi playoff run by Uncle Lenny. Take the value. I mean, he's going in ninth, 10th round currently. Absolutely absurd.
Yeah, he's pretty much, it's not a guy that's going to necessarily win you a league without injury. But again, we know that these running backs, we've seen it already with James Robinson and Gus Edwards. All it takes is one injury, and suddenly you're a running back 2 consistently in fantasy and potentially even an RB1. If Fournette were to get injured, Rojo would be considerably higher than a lot of the running backs that people will take in the 3rd and 4th round of drafts.
Yep, absolutely. And speaking of some of our late round targets as well, this is a guy that I'm going to make the same argument for that I did for James White. Nyheim Hines, running back from the Indianapolis Colts, currently going off the board, RB44, 130th overall player. And he's just a genuinely very good receiving back. And people in the fantasy community want to say, well, Jonathan Taylor's ready to take that 3-down rule. Jonathan Taylor's a stud. Jonathan Taylor is the next Saquon Barkley, yada, yada, yada. And I fully get it. I want Jonathan Taylor to end up developing into that type of running back. But from a real life coaching perspective, if you're Frank Reich, if you're the Indianapolis Colts, and you got a guy as genuinely efficient in the receiving role that he was last year in Nyheim Hines, why would you take him out of that third down capacity? Again, do I want to get that role? Absolutely. But Nyheim Hines is genuinely a good receiving back and has shown that last year in any type of PPR, half PPR, full PPR, you name it, he can give you good, sustainable RB2-3 production. And currently going off the board, again, as I mentioned with James White in that 12th, 13th round area at times. Again, if you have to take this guy in the 10th round in a full PPR, I still think that's a really good value. It makes no sense to me. Again, RB0 candidate, no brainer for me taking a guy like Nyheim Hines, aka Indianapolis James White.
Yeah, literally Indianapolis James White. No arguments there. Michael Carter, another guy that I think is a good RB0 kind of strategy guy that a lot of people will target, because currently going off the board, RB31, 91st overall. This is a guy with very little backfield competition. Now we're hearing some whispers that Ty Johnson's having a good camp. Maybe he looks like one of the better running backs there. All that tells me is that Michael Carter isn't quite ready yet. He's not ready to take over this role. I do think he's eventually going to, because he's a very talented player. He's a guy that I had a late 2nd round grade on coming out of North Carolina. He was the backfield teammate of Javonte Williams, who we talked about earlier in this video. I think he has that Austin Eckler framework where once he gets his shit figured out basically in pass protection and on 3rd down, he should be able to carve out a great receiving role for himself. He's still an efficient runner, good after contact, and very elusive. And this is a great scheme. We've seen the 49ers, Michael LaFleur, coming from the Shanahan tree, elevate the play of their running backs. And I think once Michael Carter is able to establish a role for himself, his play will get elevated the way that we saw a guy like Raheem Mostert, for example, who has kind of a similar skill set to a guy like Michael Carter. So I think he's another guy that once you get outside that 8th round range, I'm willing to pull the trigger on Michael Carter.
Yeah, and I'll quickly say, despite limited opportunity, we're talking about 16 opportunities per game in the past 2 years. Raheem Mostert in that type of scheme, in that type of wide zone scheme that Michael Carter can absolutely thrive in, was a top 15 running back in points per game. And I do think Michael Carter, despite not maybe having a stranglehold on a 20 opportunity per game role, even if he ends up developing it to a 14, 15 opportunity per game back, we could see an absolutely efficient dynamite player that is adept in the receiving game on what we believe to be one of the most ascending offenses in the league. So fully agree with you there on Carter. And the final back on this list is surprisingly a guy that actually had a higher ADOT than freaking Deebo Samuel last year. Take it away with David Johnson.
Yeah, David Johnson's such a gross pick here. I know, like, he's one of my highest owned running backs. And the reason is because he's a starting running back for an NFL team. And I get him in like the 15th, 16th round all the time. That's why I have him as a highly owned running back. We typically like to build our running back cores on Underdog with like 3, 4 running backs, 5 running backs sometimes. And David Johnson is a great 4th or 5th running back to do that with, because I think this RB core is going to be David Johnson and Phillip Lindsay. And currently going off the board is the RB 42, 121st overall pick. David Johnson might legitimately be a 3-down player for this team. And it's going to be a bad offense. I understand that. It's definitely going to be a bad offense. But I think Mark Ingram's going to get cut, personally. I think he's going to get traded, cut, whatever the case is. I think another team is going to go after him. Maybe it's Baltimore, maybe it's somebody else. This is a guy that had a top 10 opportunity share in the NFL last year, and he ran the 5th most routes at the running back position, despite missing a number of games, and he was top 10 in yards per touch. So as a receiving back, David Johnson can still get it done. He's not very good on the ground, but he is the biggest running back on this team, so he might get the goal line work, and he is the best receiving back on this team. So when you can say that he's going to get the 2 most valuable roles for an offense, he's worth taking a shot in the 12th, 13th round of drafts, and that's exactly where I took him in my home league draft yesterday. I took him in the 13th round as my 4th running back because I thought, you know what, hey, he might be the starting running back and the pass-catching running back for a team that is going to be playing from behind very often and a lot of passing work involved in PPR formats. So maybe, he gets the goal line work as well. And this is a guy that can carve out a back-end RB2 role that you're getting in the 13th, 14th round of drafts.
Yeah, and I mean, you may want to shave your eyebrows once you make the pick, but hey, I mean, it's pure value at that current point of the draft. I mean, David Johnson, it says RB 42, 121st overall, but this is a guy, once you get into drafts, once people start talking themselves out of the Texans players, could end up falling to that 13th, 14th round area. And at that point, let's be honest here, what are you drafting? Your Hunter Renfrows? Like, come on.
Yeah, of course I would
you're not
rather
drafting
take a
Hunter
high
Renfrow.
upside receiver like Terrace Marshall instead. But if all those guys are off the board and you're staring down the barrel of like Nelson Aguilar versus David Johnson and you're really weak at running back or you're low on running backs, then I don't mind taking David Johnson at all, because honestly, like, I don't see a huge difference between his outlook last year and his outlook this year. Obviously, he doesn't have Deshaun Watson this year, but his outlook last year was not worthy of a 4th round price tag. And that's probably why he's going this low, is because people got burned by him. But I think last year he should have been going in the 6th, 7th, 8th round. This year he's probably should have been going in the 7th, 8th, 9th round, and he's going in the 13th round. So at that point, I'm willing to take the value up there. So pretty gross running back to close out this list with. But if you guys did enjoy this video, again, we tried to make this a little bit more brief, a little bit more digestible for those of you guys that are new to the channel. I hope you enjoyed that. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. If you want more in-depth breakdowns on some of these guys, we were sure to make reference to any time that we did provide a more in-depth breakdown of them. So make sure to check those out. Like the video if you enjoyed. Comment whoever your highest owned running back is. Maybe you've already done a number of redraft leagues and you want to, shout out the fact that you have DeAndre Swift in 5 of 5 redraft leagues or something like that. So make sure to comment that down below. If you want access to our rankings for your fantasy draft coming up, you can get access to them by using Underdog Fantasy code FSE at sign up. With a minimum $10 deposit, you'll get $25 on top of whatever you deposit to the site. That'll get you both of our draft guides, all of our rankings, Superflex, Dynasty, Redraft, PPR, half PPR, whatever you guys need. It'll also get you a bunch of other things as well. So hope you guys enjoyed that. Peace out and enjoy your Tuesday.
Why you need